Hi guys, Ryu here, and in this video I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of my settings of Blender and add-ons. So let's start with HardOps. When you install HardOps, you'll see this icon here on the top. Just go here, and what I want you to enable is enable this Auto T panel, then the box cutter notifications, Q menu, sequential, and menu prefixes. I think the Q menu sequential actually is enabled by default. So just this one, the prefix is on Q menu, and this one is optional. So the blank matte similar to viewport. What it does basically, it displays the similar kind of a color of a matte in viewport as you have in LookDev. So it's kind of like to pre-visualize your stuff, okay? The Auto T panel and N panel will move these two panels outside when you, for example, work with modifiers. So if I'm gonna add a cube here, and let's say at the bevel, you see these panels slide out. So when I press H, it just makes the room for this H menu here, okay, at the bottom, see that? And when I apply the bevel, so I click, the panels move back in. So it just makes you more room to, to work. In terms of box cutter, it's really easy. All you need to do is go here and enable right mouse button to cancel N-gon. What it will do, it will enable you to work with an N-gon in a way that when you create an N-gon, and let's say you have a lot of points and you want to cancel that easily and start working, from scratch, you press right mouse button and everything is gone. If you want to remove just one point, what you need to do is press backspace. It will remove point by point going backwards, okay? So that's that, and that's all I do for both add-ons. And then we have PowerSave. So PowerSave is really easy. I have this autosave and autosave temporary files enabled. The autosave interval, I left it at default at 2 minutes, so every 120 seconds. And I choose this option here, which is autosave suffix. What it will do when you click PowerSave, PowerSave will save a file, and then after 2 minutes, if you introduce some changes to your Blender, autosave is going to create a file with a suffix called autosave, so you know which file is which. It's really important. Machine tools, really easy guys, very simple. So let's go to machine tools and I'll show you my settings. Now I'm using Machine Tools Deus Ex, meaning I have one more additional option, which is this one. So don't worry about it. If it's, your Machine Tools is different, that's because I'm using the paid version, but we're not gonna be using this, so don't worry about it. This is all you need to enable, okay? Nothing else, right? I don't even use all of these, but this is what I have always enabled because I really like these pie menus. If you want to check what keys I used for these, you can always go to key maps and you'll have all the keystrokes here. You can check it. So again, enable these and that's all you have to worry about, okay? And save preferences. Now let's talk about Blender settings because I changed a few things, okay? First of all, interface 1.4, so it's a bit bigger. Then themes, I've changed colors on the 3D viewport, so you can change colors here of your, like active object, selected object, edges, etc. Usually I have it set to white, okay? So most of my stuff is set to white. So active object, selected object, select edge, vertex select, they're all white, okay? Then this option here under face orientation, I reduced alpha to 0. Now what it does, when I flip one of the faces here, and I'm gonna press Alt V and enable face orientation, you see I do not see the blue faces, right? Because normally what happens when you enable this face orientation tool, you can see the blue faces as well. I don't want that because it's just distracting. So where is this option here? So when you reduce the alpha here to 0, basically you're seeing this gray, gray texture, which is great because all I want to see is the information that's incorrect. So flipped faces. So that's that. And then very important, the vert size, change it to 7. So when you have verts here, because I think default is 3, which is microscopic. I don't like it. I like it bigger. You can also change the object origin size to 7 as well. It's going to be a bit bigger. So, and then save prefs, right? Now you need to enable certain add-ons, like for example, loop tools. That's one, okay? Edit mesh tools, okay? Then you have bull tool. Then you have F2. Then you have 3D Print Toolbox. Okay, this one. Node Wrangler, right? Node Wrangler. Copy Attributes menu. Okay. And I think that's about, oh, and F2. This is for faces. So these are all default Blender add-ons I have enabled day one. Okay, I just enable them and I forget about it because usually you're gonna be needing them. So that's really important, right? And then let's go to input. Nothing changed here. Navigation, that's important. Orbiter on selection on, perspective, auto perspective off, and depth on. Okay. Then under key map, spacebar set to search. By default, it's play. And under system, undo steps to 56, which is maximum. You can just type any number here and it's gonna default to 256. CUDA, set it to card. You could do optics, but I noticed that I sometimes have bugs with rendering, so I can't be bothered with this. We're gonna be using the noiser anyway, so its rendering is very quick. Do not select your CPU, regardless what CPU you're using. So it's always slowing down if you're rendering on a card, so I would just avoid that. And that's about it, guys. And save prefs and you're done, okay? Now let's talk about Blender settings here in the main scene, okay? So first of all, compositing, really important. You want to have this set up. Let me just remove this and show you the original window here. It looks like this, okay? This is what you're gonna see when you enable use nodes. You're gonna see these two nodes, okay? Separate them, Shift A, and just type noise, denoise, and drop it in. Now under cycles, you have to be in cycles, okay? Otherwise this option here is gonna be invisible. Click on denoising data, you'll see two new nodes popping up here. Connect them accordingly. So normal to normal, albedo to albedo, and your compositor is set, okay? Go back to rendering and disable this denoise here because you're not going to be needing that, okay? Sampling, set it to 250. You could set it to 300, but you don't need more than that. Scroll down to light path and follow my numbers. You could go higher. You could go, for example, 18, 12, 12, 12, or lower, 8, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, you know. It's up to you, but don't go lower than that because, especially if you're using decals, because I think below 7, decals will not be transparent. The alpha plane of a decal will actually be visible in renders, in cycles. So, you know, I wouldn't go below, I think 6 or 7, I can't remember. I'm usually keeping above 8. This is fine. Now under performance here, on the tiles, this is system dependent, okay? I would start with 256, then move on to 512, then 24, and then higher. I've noticed that the best rendering settings for my card, which is 390, it's 2048. But 256 is a great start, so start with 256 and move upwards. This is really system dependent, so it depends basically on what kind of computer you have. So you just play with these settings. This tiling will determine how big of a tile computer will render at once. And so it will basically shorten or lengthen the time of your renders. So just play with it and fine tune it. And guys, that's about it, okay? That's literally all you need to have set up in here. Now, if you're gonna go back to layout, I'm gonna open the shader editor here. So let's go here, and under world, all you need to do with our Node Wrangler add-on enabled, click here, Control T, and just move it a little bit to the right or left, and click this icon and add your HDRI. We're gonna be covering this in rendering section, so don't worry about it. And that's that. And when you go here now to, you know, edit and save preferences, right? So you're gonna save preferences, and then you're gonna go here and default and save startup file. Every time you open your Blender, you will be seeing the same scene. So clean it the way you want. I usually have it set up like this. So when I open, I have a nice, beautiful, clean scene with some horizon, very, very nice and organized and tidy. So, you know, I like it like that. Usually what I do is I turn off all the add-ons. So press W to turn off box cutter and hard ups, so I can start without any add-ons. And I have everything key mapped to my mouse, so I can very easily toggle between these two add-ons, pressing Alt W and W to switch it off. So there you go. That's all settings for Blender that you need to know, and I'll see you in the modeling part.
So the last video on texture sets showed you kind of how they work, how to use them, set them up, things like that. And I briefly showed you how you would set it up in Marmoset. In this video, I actually want to show you that full process so there's absolute clarity when you're doing this on your own. So if you are using multiple texture sets, it does operate a little bit differently, but it's very logical the way it works. Okay, so here's the gun we used for the two texture sets, the UVs 001 and the UVs 002. So basically, the process that we used in the course originally would be exactly the same. I would just kind of split these up into different parts. So maybe what I would do is go to the back here, and I would just, make this one piece. So what we could do is, actually let me make a separate save here. So what we could do is Control A, Visual Geometry to Mesh, and then join it. Remember, make sure you have your triangulate modifier on there, very important. So we could hide that one. And same idea here. You could probably just skip through this part if you remember what to do, but emphasis is always a good thing. So Control A, and then Control J that one. And then we also have our upper portion here. Oops. I think that's everything. Control A and then Control J. Then same for this one. Control A, Control J. Cool. So now what we can do is, rename all of these. So let me delete out these empties real quick, and let me just turn all these back on. And I think we have a few things that aren't really doing anything, so we can delete those as well. So this one would be base underscore low. This one would be bottom underscore low. This is the same exact process we used already in the course, so I'm just kind of doing it again because it's always good to show. And then we're going to have stock underscore low. And then same idea for the high poly. There's really nothing different we're doing here for the high poly. I already have the original high poly exported. The only difference here is our low poly is just going to export with two texture sets instead of one. So I'm going to actually go ahead and just use the high poly FBX that we already exported previously in the course. If you want a refresher on that, just go back to the baking section and watch the video titled Baking an Important Discussion, where I show you the full process of preparing your model for export. Alright, so the process is exactly the same when you're using multiple texture sets inside of Marmoset. You would simply load in your high and low poly. And I actually forgot to export the low poly here, so just make sure you do that. We'll just select everything, and then File, Export, FBX, and this one is just going to be the gun underscore low. I'm going to put it in a different folder so I don't overwrite the old one. Cool. Alright, so here in Marmoset, we're just going to load it all in. So we have the gun low, the low poly, and we have the high poly. So that's easy enough, right? But now you're going to see if we tick on this multiple texture sets button, we're going to have the two texture sets listed here. And we're just going to want to make these, 2K or 4K, whatever you want. All the other settings shown in the baking section are the same, so no change there really. And then you can bake out your normals and I guess ambient occlusion. Now when you bake those out, you're going to see instead of having one normal map and one ambient occlusion map, we're going to have two of each because we have two different texture sets. And I'll quickly show you how to set this up inside of Substance Painter as well. I think there's actually a bug and I want to show you how to bypass it. So usually in Substance Painter, you just load in your, let's see, where were we? You usually just load in your low poly, right? And then you go in here and you import your baked maps. So in this case, we'd have one of each. So I would just load them all in and then click on OK. But I've noticed a bug here inside of Substance Painter. I don't know if it's something to do with this down here, but I found a way to bypass it. You're going to see if I try to load any of them in, we only have one listed. I don't know why. If anyone has a solution, just email me. It's probably something I'm just overlooking, but I haven't found a solution yet. So basically what I do for this type of situation is I go here to File, Import Resources, Add Resources, then we can just kind of load in the rest. So we already have one loaded in here called Bake UVs. I don't know what that one is. I guess we'll just load all of them in. Click Open and just change all of these to texture. And I only want to load these in for the current session because I'm not going to need these outside of this project. And then click on import, and then once those import, they're going to be listed over here automatically. So you're going to have two texture sets now, so you're going to have to go to each one. So this one's the 001. Same with this one, we're going to load those in. Then we're going to click on the second texture set and then load those in. There we go. And you're going to see it's basically, the same type of stuff going on. Let's see, let's move around. Let's just drop a material on here and just, show you how that works real quick. There's not too much left to show. So the whole texturing process is the same. Just know that if you drop, a material on here, it's only going to apply to that texture set. So if you want to use the same material, you'll have to either copy and paste it. So Control C and then Control V, or you're just going to have to drag it back on with the other texture set selected. So that's it. That's how you deal with multiple texture sets. There's really not too much of a difference in setup. You just have to do a few things differently. Alright, so I'm going to show you in this video how to set up everything for Unity. So Unity is a little bit different, the way you set up the maps in there. There's no sort of node editors or anything like that. It's a bit easier, more user-friendly. So we're going to go up here to File and Export Textures and go to Output Templates again. Now it kind of depends on what you're using. Unity has an HD render pipeline, and it also has a universal render pipeline, which is better in terms of performance, but in terms of quality, not as good. So it kind of depends on which one you want to do. The process is pretty similar. We need to add an ambient occlusion map to make sure we can use the AO. So right now we don't have that in the output map section. So I'm going to be using the universal render pipeline option and metallic standard. And I actually made a copy. I'm going to remove this copy. What we want to do is take this metallic standard, right click and duplicate it, okay? And we don't need the emission unless you're using emission. I'm not, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. And then I just wanna go ahead and click on that gray button, copy and paste this, and just rename this to AO, okay? And then all we have to do is simply come in here. We're gonna click and drag this in and choose gray channel. Alright, so now basically what we have is if we kind of expand this out a bit more, we're going to have the albedo, which is basically the base color. We're going to have the metallic smoothness. We're going to have the normal and ambient occlusion, which is all we really need. So now we're just going to go to settings again. I'll just do PNG. I'll do the usual 8 bits dithering. We're going to make sure we choose the correct output template. So the one we copied, looks like I have two. Let me make sure I'm selecting the right one. So for me, it's the underscore copy. So we'll choose, actually no, it's this one right here. Cool. And then we just kind of choose the folder we want to export to. I'll make a new folder here. So I'll just call this one Unity Maps. There we go. And then select that folder and we can basically just export it. Choose the resolution you want. I'm using 4K. We can export it now. And then you're going to have all of this stuff right here. So you're going to have your normal map. Looks good. So you can kind of load these in and just see how they look if you want. And we're also going to have our ambient occlusion, the one we added in, which is exactly what we need. Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and hop into Unity. So once you're here in Unity, all you have to do is right click and import your low poly FBX file. So you just right click, import new asset, then it should load in. We also want to import the textures. So same idea. Go to our Unity Maps folder, drag all of these in and click on import. Now this part's very important. Click on the normal map here and make sure you change the texture type to normal map, all right? Now you're also going to see that we have this option for max size when you select these. Right now it's 2048. You could change these to 4096 to each of them. So you're going to see that updates over there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that for each of them here. Now what you can do is drag in this file. It's really easy to do. You can also press E and R to kind of change the gizmo, the rotation and stuff. Now this part is where it's really annoying. I don't quite understand why it's like this, but if you click on this little arrow, you're going to have like all the different pieces. Remember we had 4 different pieces for this gun. And we're also going to have our material listed in here, but the material is actually grayed out. So what we need to do is actually click on this right here. And you're going to see if you go to this materials panel, there's going to be a remapped materials option. So what we're going to do is right click and create a new material. We'll just call this gun mat or something. And then what we're going to do is drag this in to remap the material. Then when we go click apply, now what we can do is select this material and drag in our normal map, and everything's going to update just fine. I don't know why it's like this, but it is. So we're going to have our metallic smoothness. So this will go to metallic. This is going to be our ambient occlusion. So occlusion. And then we're also going to have our albedo, so base color. Cool. And there we are. There it is. Now what you can actually do is adjust the smoothness value like that, which is pretty cool. You can drag that all the way down and kind of have that effect. You know, it kind of depends what you're going for. I'm also going to adjust the lighting a bit. So I'm going to right click, go to light, and then choose directional light. And you can actually kind of like, you know, rotate that and play with it and get some cool different effects. But that's like the general workflow for importing your assets into Unity. You're going to see this is very clean. There's no issues with the triangulations or anything like that. Looks really good. The normal maps look great as well. Just overall a really clean mesh. So that's it, guys. Super easy. As for, you know, you setting up your scene and making it work and doing all your whatever stuff you're doing in your game engines, that's on you. This is a game asset course. I'm not going to show you how to make a game out of it. I want to show you the import process here, and this is how we do it. So I hope this video helps. So now you have Unreal Engine and Unity under your belt. Pretty straightforward process. I think Unity is a bit easier though, because you don't have to work with nodes. So that's about it. Thanks for watching, and hope this video helped. Alright, in this video, I'm going to show you how to bring everything into Unreal Engine. In my opinion, Unreal Engine has one of the easiest setups. It's very similar to the node setups you would have in Blender for connecting up your maps. And even if you're not good at nodes like me, it's very straightforward. So let me show you. So download Unreal Engine. I don't think I need to make a tutorial on that. You can just Google Unreal Engine and download it. You're going to go to Games. I'm going to go to Next, and I'm just going to use a blank scene. We don't need to use any sort of like pre-built scene. So blank, we're going to go to Next, and I don't want the starter content, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose no starter content, like that, and then click on Create Project. You can also choose like the folder you want to put it in, stuff like that. So what you can do is you can go to Add and Import, and then go to Import. And you just basically are going to import your low poly FBX file for whatever model it is. And very straightforward. In the case of the weapon here, remember we have 4 separate pieces that I kind of use together. So I'm just going to shift click on all of these. We're just going to drag it into the scene. You're going to see no real issues here. I do want to rotate it. Now you can change the gizmos by pressing Q. Actually not Q, W, E, and R. So those 3. So the E key will just kind of rotate it this way, I think. Looks good. And what I want to do is I want to load in all the maps. So we can go ahead and import those as well. So we're just going to go to Import. Now, we don't want to use the maps that we already exported for Blender, which I showed you before. We don't want to use these. We actually want to use the Unreal Engine preset. It's already pre-built for you. You don't have to change anything. So let's hop back into Substance Painter real quick. So this part's really easy. We're just going to go to File, Export Textures, and there's going to be a template here called Unreal Engine 4 Packed. Now what it's going to have is going to have the base color, so just the color information. It's going to have an RMA map, which is basically the roughness, metallic, and ambient occlusion all packed into one map. And we also have a normal map here. And if you're using emissive stuff, there's also an emissive one. I'm not using the emissive personally, so it's probably just going to export as a blank map. So this is fine. I don't think there's anything we need to change. I just wanted to show you this. We're going to go back to Settings. We're going to go to Unreal Engine Packed, Unreal Engine 4 Packed, that is. Now, you could use PNG or even a Targa file. People say Targa is much higher quality. I mean, I don't really see much of a difference if I'm honest, but 8-bit Targa is probably more than enough. You could enable the dithering as well in cases where you need that. You can research what dithering is. There's a lot of in-depth videos on that will probably bore you here. It basically just adds like a layer of noise over certain artifacts you might get. So we have size 4K, that's totally cool. I'm just gonna go ahead and make a new folder in here. I'm gonna call this Unreal Engine Maps, just so that way I can separate everything. And then we're just gonna go ahead and export it. So now we can go back into Unreal Engine here and import those 3 maps. I'm just gonna go ahead and go to Unreal Engine Maps. And you can't see the preview, but you'll be able to see it when you load it in. So we have the base color, normal, and the RMA map. So we're going to open all of those and give it a second to load in, and now we can see the preview. So one thing I want to mention here, just to kind of clear any confusion up, because this used to confuse me. So when we went to this output template here, the one we were using, Unreal Engine 4 Packed, if you take a look at the roughness metallic occlusion, the RMA map, you're going to see that the R is for ambient occlusion, the G is for roughness, and the B is for metallic. This is going to be important in just a second. Now let me show you. We're going to go back into Unreal Engine and just double click on the material, load it in, and just double click on that. Let's bring this in a bit. And this is just, it's not the same thing, but I kind of give the analogy of Blender's principled BSDF shader, that's an easier way to think about it. So all we really need to do here is we need to drag all 3 of these maps here. So just shift click on them, drag them in. This is going to be our base color. This is going to be our RMA map, and this is going to be our normal map. So I like to put the normal map on the bottom. Okay, so easy enough. What we're going to do is connect this to the normal slot, the RGB channel. Same for the base color. This will go to the base color right here. Now this is where it gets, some people can get confused, but like I just showed you here, the R is for AO, the G is for roughness, and the B is for metallic. So same idea in here. We can just hop back in. So the R is going to be for our ambient occlusion, the G is going to be for the roughness, and the B is going to be for the metallic. And then all we have to do is click on the apply button here. Okay. And everything's going to load in very nicely. Now you might notice that the weapon does look a little bit different, and that's simply because Unreal Engine and Substance Painter have different lighting setups by default. So this isn't going to be, how to create a game in Unreal Engine, it's how to create a game asset. So as you, make whatever you're trying to make in Unreal Engine and, set up different lighting effects, obviously this weapon is going to look completely different, kind of depending on the angle of the lighting. But you're going to see this loads in just fine, even though we modeled this with Ngons. Scary, right? Well, it's not Ngons anymore because we triangulated it, and you can even preview that by going to Show, and where is it? It's one of these. So you go to Show, Advanced, and then Mesh Edges here, and you can actually kind of see the overall topology, and it doesn't have any issue here in Unreal Engine, so it's perfect. Going to go ahead and turn that off. And that's how you do it, guys. It's really easy. Don't worry too much about the fact that it looks different from Substance Painter. It is literally just because Substance Painter has different lighting setups, and also Substance Painter has a different, set of HDRIs we can choose from. So the lighting is definitely going to be different compared to what we have here in our empty scene. And as you begin to, light your scenes, put this in different types of environments, it's always going to look completely different. As most of you know, lighting is incredibly important, not only for games and, movies and photography, but also for rendering. So it is going to look different depending on the engine you're using and depending on your lighting setup. But that is how we do it. That is the full process to make an optimized game asset ready for a game engine. That's all you have to do. There are quite a few steps, but as you follow the MAD-T framework, and you learn how to, bake, whether you're using Substance Painter or Marmoset, and as you learn how to texture, everything is going to be very easy. So I hope this video made sense to you. I want to go ahead and just, I'm going to take all these real quick and just rotate it a little bit. I'm kind of curious as to how it'll look as I keep rotating this around. You're going to kind of see it just really depends on the rotation, how it looks. Oh, I want to show you one more cool trick here. So check this out. If this is too glossy for you and you want to make it rougher, what you can always do is go back into the node editor here, and you can actually add in, just type in math. No, not math. I'm thinking of Blender. Type in multiply. And what you can actually do is drag in this multiply node, and you could, for example, for the roughness channel right here, you could connect the green to the slot A, and then you could add in a, let's just see, a scalar parameter, which is basically just a number. So we could do that, and we could just make the default value like 2, for example, and then connect that one up here, and then plug that into the roughness slot. So we're basically doubling the overall roughness by doing that, which is kind of cool, because oftentimes I find that I actually want to adjust the roughness value. And you're going to see in this case, it actually looks a little bit better in my opinion. Pretty cool. But yeah, that's just a cool little trick I use sometimes if I ever want to make the textures a bit rougher without having to readjust the textures in Substance Painter and going through that whole process. So that's it for this video, and I really hope it helped you.
Hi guys, Ryu here, and welcome to possibly the last video in which we're going to edit our file, our image. So now, first of all, what you need to do is load them into Photoshop, so basically drag them in. And you will have two files, because we rendered this one without background and the one with background, right? So click on the one without background and click on it and drag it, and hold Shift, hover over this tab here, then hover your mouse over this image and release, okay? This will ensure that you will drop an image directly on top of your original rifle, okay? So now you can see that our image doesn't fit the frame, so press Ctrl 0 and it will fit into our Photoshop window. So let's enable and disable this and see what's happening. You see that when we remove the background, we're getting light coming from underneath, which is why the bottom of the gun is much lighter. But I don't actually think it looks better, because it kind of looks flat. This actually adds a bit of character, so I'll leave it. Now this one, this image on top, we are gonna be using, just for cutouts, so it's gonna be extremely useful. So what we need to do here is a few things. First of all, you will notice that because we cut the background really close to the camera, we get this white artifacts in the bottom, okay? This is basically a camera seen through these holes and just basically seeing nothingness in the render. So we got these white spots. It's really easy to remove them. You could re-render this if you want to with a larger floor, but much easier is to simply select this with Marquee tool like that and go here to edit and simply content aware fill. And if it doesn't work for you, it's probably because your layer is locked, so simply double click on the layer to unlock it, okay, and that's it. And now you can see that Content Aware has created these extensions here. They may be not perfect, it's a little bit wobbly, but who cares? It's sorting out the issue. No one's gonna notice anyway. So, and now what we need to do is we need to make sure that this gun, sort of stands out and it's properly edited. Select these two layers with Shift, and Shift, Control, Alt, and E to create a stamp visible layer on top of it. Go to Filter and Camera Raw. Now usually when I'm editing these images, I'm using add-ons, and one of them is called Nik Collection, the other one is called Infinite Color, and these are the ones I'm using in 95% of cases, okay? So if you can afford it, just get them because they're amazing, especially Color Effects Pro from Nik Collection. And the infinite color is just incredible. I'm using it in few of my tutorials. In this one, we decided to go pure vanilla. So if some of you guys don't have these add-ons or plugins, you can still do it. So now here in Camera Raw, what I want to do is I want to look at the histogram, right? Now you can see that the histogram is perfect. We don't have any black clipping or white clipping. What I mean by that is that our black tones and white tones are not overexposed. If they were, you would see that one of these squares would be basically highlighted, and if you clicked on it, you will see like a purple bits in your image. I can simulate it by simply increasing the black value here. You can see now it's flashing here. Click that. All of these elements here have no details. It's just pure black. So you might want to avoid that. If that's happened to your render, I see a lot of renders, okay, they are way too dark, they kind of like this, That's just too dark, guys, okay? You always need to look at the histogram. So left is blacks, right is whites, okay? So now what we're gonna do is we're going to actually increase the exposure a bit of the whole image, okay? So just a little bit, right? Increase the exposure a little bit. And I'm doing it because I want to increase clarity on the gun. With clarity, I'm gonna pump the shadows up here. And usually what I do is I keep them at the same distance, more or less. So, you know, just I don't want this image to become too dark. You can also lift the blacks a little bit, okay? So move this slider to the right, maybe +1 or +2. So the image is actually quite bright, okay? You might want to drop the highlights a bit, just tad, you know, just a tiny bit. It will drop the highlights on these, you know, kind of like a shiny areas, okay? After doing this, I would, like I said, go to infinite color and just simply slap it infinite color, and I will show you how it works. So if I go to my extensions and just turn on infinite color, and all I do is literally select light and click on create, then I, you know, sort of circle through them, and I find something that I really like, then you can adjust them here manually, or you can reshuffle them here. All these elements, all these adjustments here, you can find on this menu on the bottom, okay? So for example, curves are in here, right? These are curves. Then you get color balance, which is probably going to be somewhere here. There you go, color balance. And then you have selective color, which is also here. They're all here, guys, okay? Selective color in the bottom. Then you got stuff like color lookup, which is really cool. You know, but in this case, like I said, we're going to be going manually. So let's pop here a color lookup, and this is a really cool stuff. It comes from analog photography days. And you can simply click here, and then click on this box, click one more time, and then scroll your mouse. And you're gonna scroll through different presets, okay? When you find something you kind of like for example, this one is pretty cool. We can play with this, you know. We could, for example, change the blend mode here to soft light. Or we could leave it on normal, right? You could change blend to color, so it's gonna affect only color, but it will not affect brightness. Or luminosity, which will affect luminosity, but it will not affect color. On normal, it's gonna be normal. Basically, it's gonna affect everything, right? You could drop the fill opacity on it, so we could just drop the opacity a little bit. And you can see that it's actually affecting our black tones quite heavily. So what we can do is double click here and open this window called Blend Diff. And if you look here on the bottom, you see this underline layer. You can remove this effect from underline layer, which means you'll be removing this effect from the layer underneath, which is layer 3. So if I'm going to move this slider to the right, okay, you'll see that this effect will disappear from the black tones. But to make the transition a bit more natural, what we're going to do is hold Alt and split the cursor and, you know, split it like that, so that the transition is going to be a bit more natural here. And now you can see that it affects the image, but it doesn't actually darken it down so much. So if you look at the histogram, if I toggle between them, right, the histogram changes on the right hand side, but on the left hand side, so the blacks are kind of intact. So we could have added a bit of a punch, a bit of a color, just with one simple, you know, modifier. Now we can add gradient map, which is really awesome. So here, and now we can remap colors in this image. So for instance, we could go for like a cinematic render. So go here, click on this bottom left square, click here, choose something like a, you know, I don't know, cyanish, okay, or bluish, whatever. And then click OK. You can click here and choose something warmer for highlights. So we're gonna go with something orange, for example, right? Something really warm, something like this, okay? And you could even, you know, grab something in the middle. So we could just go with something, I don't know, maybe something slightly less blue, maybe, or maybe kind of warmer. You know, slightly yellowish, something like this, and click OK, and change the mode here to soft light, right? So soft light, you simply change the you know, opacity, right? And you can introduce a bit of a, you know, kind of like a color shift to your image. So you can do a lot of interesting stuff, guys. Okay, you can do the same thing with curves. So for example, you could go to curves, right? And you could here, when you switch it, for example, from RGB to blue, it will affect different color channels, okay? So for example, here I could lift this up by dragging up. it will introduce blue tones to shadows. And if I drag this one down, I'm going to introduce warm tones into highlights. This will create kind of like a sort of a cross-processing effect. Here too, dragging up is warm, and here would be a bit of cyan in shadows. So here is highlights, here is shadows. And if you don't know how this works, basically the opposite of blue is yellow, the opposite of green is magenta, and the opposite of red is cyan. So if you're going to remove red, you're going to be adding cyan. If you're going to remove blue, you're going to be adding yellow. So this is why when I slid this blue tone down, it added more warm tones into highlights. And if I'm going to go this way, it's going to be, you know, more on the blue side. So you can create some really cool effects with this, you know, with this post-processing. And here you can change it from normal to color, and it will affect only color, not the contrast of an image. Then let's just stack it with another curve. You want to stack as many layers as you can, because it will ensure that you have more control over what you're doing. And we're going to introduce some more contrast. So now we're going to use this layer here, the one without any background. We're going to control click that to create a selection. Right, so one more time, control click it. You see these marching ends, this is selection. We're going to go here to adjustments, and when you click on curves, it will create a mask that will mask this gun, which means if I perform any changes now, it's going to only change the gun. But I want to invert it because I want to affect the background. So I'm going to click on the mask here, right? And I'm going to press Ctrl I to invert it. So now when I'm going to click on the curves, I'm going to grab this handle. I can click here and drag it up to brighten the background only, okay? See, so now my background is much brighter, yeah? We can reduce the effect of this a little bit, so it's not as bright, but it's kind of brighter, okay? So it's a little bit brighter, but not too bright. That looks pretty cool to me. And we can do the same thing with the gun. So now control click here, and other curves, and now we can actually adjust the gun. So we could grab this handle again here, and let's see, make this one brighter, right? And this one darker. And this could introduce some really interesting, you know, sort of a local contrast. Now, if it's too strong in blacks, for example, you can still, you know, remove it from the darkest tones again. So double click on this layer here and simply split this slider with Alt. You could change it also to luminosity so it doesn't affect colors. If it affects only brightness levels, okay? And that's a really cool, you know, really cool edit. If you Alt click here, this original layer, you can see how far we've come. Now these highlights here are a bit harsh. So I'm going to click on these curves and Shift, Control, Alt, and E. I'm going to go to Filter and Camera Raw, right? And I'm going to drop the highlights a bit, right? Okay. And the whites a little bit. Click OK. And I'm going to move this this mask on top. So hold Alt, click on the mask and drag it on top and release. This will clone the mask and copy to the upper layer. So now you see that the gun's been affected, but you know that's the only thing that's been affected. I just simply remove a bit of a highlight here on this gun. Maybe it's too much, so let's just, you know, drop the opacity, but I don't want to make it too highlighted, okay, too crazy. Now the contrast on this gun is really strong. Maybe it's a bit too strong. So we could, for example, add some levels, and we could manipulate with the midtones here, okay? So we could lift the midtones just a little bit to make it a little bit less contrasty, okay? Because it's just a bit crazy, right? And we could switch it to luminosity as well, so it doesn't affect colors, it affects only the gun itself. And you see that it just makes it look a bit more natural. And again, we can just move the mask on top and replace it with the one from the bottom, so it affects only the gun. And it kind of makes more sense, because if you look at the background, it's, you know, the gun was a bit too contrasty comparing to the background. We could stack another color lookup on top of it. Let's see if we're gonna get something interesting. Just click here and just scroll through it. Remember that we're always gonna be changing the, you know, the opacity, so that one is quite interesting. The blue one is cool as well. I really like the blue one. This one is awesome. This one is really cool. It affects the brightness, so maybe you can switch it to color and see if you could get some different color with this. It's a little bit more toned down. I kind of like that. Maybe you could just drop it a bit, you know, so make it a bit less intense. Maybe 75%. So that looks really awesome to me. Now, if you want to drop some text into your Photoshop, it's really easy. You can use, for example, decals you created in Blender or whatever Photoshop. If you would like to watch a video how I create info decals, look up this video that you see on the screen right now. It's a video on YouTube where I show you guys how to create, you know, info decals, and you can do it in Blender. And then you can create some PNG files in Photoshop and basically bring them into Photoshop and just overlay them with your image. So you can create your own branding like I did with Valkyr here. So I'm gonna grab this brush stack and I'm gonna drop it somewhere here. Now the reason why I left so much space on the bottom and top here is because I knew I'm gonna be adding some text, right? So, you know, I didn't want this text to be too invasive. So let me see that. That's pretty cool. You do want to leave some space here, okay, around this. And now watch this. This is gonna be a cool trick. We're gonna drop it just a little bit lower, so these two edges are kind of consistent. And we're going to control click this. Then I'm gonna go to curves, turn off this brush stack, and then I'm gonna simply drop the value down, and you're gonna get something like this. If you switch it to luminosity, you will not be picking up the color. You're gonna be picking up only the text, and it's pretty cool. You know, that's pretty cool. So we could do something like this, or you could go the other way. Actually, the other way could be interesting. That is kind of cool. Oh, I like that. It's less invasive than the dark one, okay? Here, the dark text would pull a lot of attention. This could actually work, but if you make it too dark, it's gonna be too, you know, too obnoxious, okay? You wanna make it sort of visible, but not the main actor, because the main actor is the gun. So you could go either way. I can't really decide which one is cooler. This one is kind of nice too. Honestly, could go either way. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Now, if you're a member of our coaching and community, then you have access to all these decals. Now, some of them will not be available. Like, for example, brush stack is not available. This is only, you know, for our use. But the Valkyr, for example, decal you will see in a second is going to be actually coming up on March to Patreon and our membership. So if you sign up to either of these, you will get it. I would suggest you sign up to membership because you're getting over there way more goodies and also discounts on our premium courses. So let's just go to decal pack and find this PNG. There we go. And we're gonna drop it somewhere here. Now you wanna be consistent with the distances of the text from the edges of the frame. So it kind of makes sense. This one should be smaller. This will be too big, right? Something like this to give it a bit more room to breathe and pull your attention up to this negative space. So here we're going to control click the Valkyr and go to curves and, you know, drop it down as well. Switch it to luminosity. This one could be a little bit more prominent, but, you know, don't overdo it, right? That's cool. And we could have some other logos here, like, for example, you know, Hardoups and Box Cutter or something, or Blender logo, or both. I'm just gonna put these files here. You can move them with Shift, holding Shift, and you can move them in a straight line. And Shift select them and Control T, move them somewhere here. This could be smaller, so this is fine. And we could just simply drop the opacity on them, you know, just like a hint. And then drop a Blender logo here as well, make it a bit bigger. And let's just zoom in. Now it's important that, you know, you align it not to the edge of the PNG, but to actually the edge of the image. So something like this would probably work. And then we're gonna drop the opacity of this one as well. That's pretty cool. This blender thing might be a bit too invasive, to be honest. Maybe it would be better if it was on the other side. That's actually okay. You could completely remove that, but actually it's a nice anchor here pulling all the way up. Now what I would suggest doing is grabbing all these tags here. So shift click on the bottom one, so select this one here, and shift click here and Control G. You can group them and rename it to, you know, text and logos, whatever. So there you go, guys. That's a final edit. I think we're looking pretty good. I'm not sure if this contrast isn't actually too heavy. So what we could do is, I think it was this one, levels. We could Control J this to duplicate it and move it on top of this image to, you know, sort of ease it off a little bit more, maybe, right? And remove this effect from the white tones, all right? So here, like that. So it's only affecting the darker tones, and, you know, play with the fill a little bit. So it's kind of less contrasty because, you know, you need to always consider the lighting in the situation that you're shooting. In this case, the lighting, you know, isn't that contrasty. You can see it on the floors, so, you know, you don't want to go too crazy on it. And there's one more thing that I want to do, and there's gonna be something that most people would never notice. Let's just click on this text and shift Control I and E to create a stem visible layer, and then click on this empty layer here. Let's zoom in and you see this element here that is really strong. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this lasso tool. I'm going to lasso select around it, okay? Hold shift and add to selection. And then I'm going to content aware this, okay? So I'm going to remove this, right? And then what I'm going to do is Control D to deselect it. And I'm going to drop opacity on this, okay? To something less visible like that, okay? You don't want really strong elements visible on your mesh. This is why, for example, when I'm adding decals, I always recommend you guys that you drop opacity on the decals. So when you're in Blender, right, and you add decals, okay, let me just add quickly a decal here so you see what I'm talking about. So let's add an info decal, right, and an info decal really. Let's add just one of my Japanese decals, okay. You see that this is so white, so what you can do is go here and drop the alpha on it, okay. So it's less crazy and less contrasty on the mesh, okay, especially when you have a dark mesh, right? Because in my opinion this is a bit too bright, but you know, that's you always need to render something and put it in Photoshop and then decide what you want to do. But in my opinion this looks better because it creates a detail, not a visual anchor that's really, really strong. And quite frankly, you don't really want to, you know, look in this direction because it's just a trigger. The most interesting stuff is happening here, here, and here, right? So you got this kind of like a triangle of interest. And you don't want attention to be pulled away from this mag because it's quite cool too. So you want to glide through it. If you're going to have some strong anchor in here, you're going to kind of stumble across it and kind of get stuck, you know what I mean? So just a little bit detailed, but, you know, there you go. All right, guys, well, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next course. Hi guys, Ryu here, and in this video we're gonna be rendering the gun. So we have a file from Josh with all the textures, and we're gonna optimize it a little bit here because there's a lot of junk we don't need. So before we start, we need to organize this collection here. So we're going to select these and right click and delete hierarchy because we don't need that, and I don't really know what these are. What's this empty for? That does nothing. Okay, let's just delete that. Cool. And we're left with this, you know, just a gun, right? Awesome. So we're going to add an empty. So Shift A and add an empty and make it a bit larger. Control I to invert selection and shift click the empty. Control P and object keep transform. I'm just gonna enable my screencast keys. There you go. So now what we can do is we can actually move this gun by moving the empty, which is gonna be a little bit easier to manipulate with it, because what I want to do is I want to angle it a bit down and put it in some kind of like a sort of a stand. Now I will not be modeling them because I already done this before, so I'm gonna literally copy it from my previous blend file from the old gun. That's actually a gun I created before I started recording it. So I'm just gonna copy these because they're already cut out, and I honestly can't be bothered doing it again. It's a really simple mesh just cut out from a cube, and I'm going to paste them here. I'm just gonna simply give you them with the file, so you can just copy paste them if you want, or create something very similar. You can see how they've been done. Really simple, just, you know, 2 cubes cut like that with a bevel, and then you know, just 2 cuts on top and the bottom, and that's it. So I'm going to apply this here, operations multiply, and here operations and multiply. All right, and I'm gonna delete all these cutters because I don't need them. Now what I will do though is I will check if everything is fine, because you can see that there's a little bit of problems here. So we're going to fix that. So, you know, we could do something like this, for instance, just to fix the shading and make it a bit cleaner, right? So you don't want any artifacts in, you know, in rendering. Same in the back is fine. Let's check this one here. Now I'm going to grab these and I'm going to, you know, drop them down. And I want to drop them down. Now these two elements, they should be on the ground, and this gun should be a little bit higher. So GZ, let's just move it higher a bit. These two, we're gonna move them down. So GZ and move them on the ground. Somewhere here, right? And we're gonna add a plane, okay? So mesh and plane. I'm gonna scale it plane and move it somewhere here on y-axis. There we go. And then we're going to lower that gun and sort of settle it down on these, you know, 2 elements. And so RX, and I'm gonna rotate it, and then we just need to lower it down so it kind of sits on it. Now the way I want to do that is quite specific, because here in the back, you see that I want to move this element a little bit further away so it doesn't overlap with this end of the stock. Because when you keep it like that and you drop this gun here, it just kind of looks weird, sort of like, you know, this stock ends on this stand. It just doesn't look really good. So what I would prefer to do is move this stock a bit further away, somewhere here, okay? It just looks a bit better. And then let's see, we need to rotate it a bit more because you can see that it doesn't fit. Also the gun here is a little bit wider. So what we might want to do, scale this on X. So we're going to select everything here in edit mode, GX, and we're just going to, maybe not this one, GX, and we're going to move it on X-axis and copy to the other side. Let's see now. That's a little bit better, but a bit more. So let's just select it again. So B, and select everything. GX, and move it a little bit more, and copy to the other side. There you go, that's more like it. And now we need to rotate this gun a bit more, because you see that here in the back, it's closer to this stand than here in the front. So RX, and just, you know, rotate it a bit more, and then GZ and drop it down, and then rotate a bit more until it kind of sits naturally on that. GZ and drop it down. There we go. That looks good to me. And here, let's see that it's a little bit sunk in, so RX, and just, you know, lift it up a bit. There you go. Maybe a bit more. Cool. Now let's go to look depth, and these stands come with a material. It's a glass. That glass is from KitOps. So if you have KitOps, you know, you can apply it yourself. If you don't, you can simply copy that from the file, and, you know, you're gonna have this stand with materials. It's really easy to do, guys. All you need to do is select these two with Shift and Control C and copy objects, and then open different blender and simply copy to another blender. You can have 2 blend files open in the same blender version. So like you see here, there's 3.0 in the bottom, and here is also 3.0. So you can do that if you want. Okay, cool. So we got that going on. Now what we need to do, oh yes, the material. So now if I go to shader editor and click on one of these and go to object, you can see that this is a glass mod from KitOps, okay? So I'll show you which one it is. If you do have GitOps and you have definitely Eevee materials. If you don't, hop on this PDF file that we supplied you with the course, and we provided there all the links that you need to all the add-ons we're using. By the way, the material in question is a glass, realistic glass. So you go here, and once you install GitOps, you can alt-click Asset Loader with Hardops, and you're gonna load this GitOps menu. And if you connect your inserts to GitOps and you purchase definitely Eevee materials, by the way, they work with free version of GitOps. All you need to do is just buy these mods. You can go to glass, and I'm using this realistic glass. Okay, so that's what I'm using for this model. By the way, you can copy these and to your Blender and use them, or just create something different if you want. Cool. So now with this set, what we need to do is expand this window here a bit, and we're gonna go to world, and we need to fix these nodes here. We're gonna select that and delete it. Okay, click this one and make sure that you have a node wrangler add-on enabled, because if you don't, it will not work. So go here and just enable node wrangler, and click on this and Control T, and you will see that you're gonna have this kind of like a tree popping out with 3 nodes. Okay, we're gonna use them for adding HDRI to our scene, because now we're in LookDev, but if you switch here to rendered view, everything is purple because there is no HDRI. So now the HDRI we're gonna be using is a free one from polyheaven.com, and you can go to polyheaven.com and download it. You can download either 4K or whatever you want. I'm probably gonna go with 8K. And the name of this one is Studio Small 09. Okay, so that's what you need to download. I found there's a lot of them in here, and I think this one is the most decent one, without any color casts, and it's half decent. It's not amazing, but it's for a free HDRI, it's pretty good. So grab that. I would suggest 4K, but you can go with 8 if you want to go with 8, or 16 if your computer can handle it. Just mind your RAM here in the bottom, because you can see that we're already at 7.9, which is quite a lot. So if you're gonna go with 16K HDRI, this is gonna jump much higher. So maybe 4 is okay. So I'm going to go to my downloads and simply grab this one, which is 098, this one. Okay, cool. You see my VRAM jumped to 8.6, and we're gonna go here to settings, the render settings here, and scroll down, go to film, and turn on transparency so we don't see that. So now here we're going to rotate this HDRI, and you could switch to Eevee if your viewport is really slow. So you can rotate this HDRI and see what works for us here. Maybe something like this. This kind of looks half decent. Now when you set it up, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have nice highlights and shadows. Okay, so for instance, this is light from behind, this is just a rim light. If you're gonna have a light from the same angle as camera, you'll have flat lighting like this. Okay, you see there's no shadows in here. So what you want is something that pops maybe from like a left hand side, and it's gonna cast nice shadows on the gun. But at the same time, you want the gun to be visible, something like this, you see. So this sort of the light is coming from the left. There are a lot of shadows underneath, so it's left top, and there are shadows in here. There's nice contrast, nice gun definition, basically. And just find a good spot for it, something that looks decent, maybe something like this. Let's see how this looks in cycles, because cycles gonna be completely different. That's actually not bad, that's pretty good. And now we need to set this background, so let's rotate it a little bit. Camera is gonna be somewhere from here, I suppose. So press page down with machine tools and smooth count to view. And for this to work, by the way, you will need to have certain options enabled in machine tools. So if you go to machine tools, it's going to be one of these pies. This one, the views pie, okay? So it's really important, right? Now page down, Control 0 to just jump into camera view, page down, and we're gonna switch this one to 17 mil. It's gonna be a little bit more compressed, and we're going to lock the view and hold Control and middle mouse button and, you know, kind of adjust it. Now we want to shoot from a slightly elevated position, maybe something like this, and you also want to angle this gun diagonally to fill the frame. In addition, we're going to be using different frame ratio. We're going to be using 21:9 because the gun is really horizontally long and the image is vertically short. So we're just going to simply change the framing to 3440 by 1440, which is 21:9 basically. And now I'm going to adjust it accordingly. Now when I'm going to be placing this in the frame, you do need more ground than, you know, the top clearance. Okay, that's important. Don't do something like this or put the gun in the middle, because it's probably gonna be looking not as good as slightly offset. Okay, things that are slightly offset usually look better. And also you want to give that ground here for that gun. Okay, not too much, but, you know, more the ground than the top. Okay, that's important. So you can look at these distances here from the base to the edge of the frame and from the top of a scope to the edge of the frame, right? Now the strength of this could be a little bit higher, maybe something like 1.2. So it's going to be a bit more light popping in. That's good. But we will see there's quite a harsh highlight here on this gun. So we might have to think about the lighting power, but we will see how it goes. Because you want to watch the reflections. These reflections here is quite strong. And the reason for that is because simply the angle of this chamfer here is just basically reflecting the light straight to the camera. So page down to unlock camera from view, and we're gonna zoom in a little bit and see how it looks. It looks pretty good. See, we have nice highlights on top of the gun, nice shadows here. There's nice definition, nice kind of a game of light and shadows and contrast. It looks really cool. I like it. I'm not crazy about these triangles here that this stand is creating. Maybe if I move this stand a little bit further away and rotate this gun a bit more on x-axis down and lift it up, you know, it's gonna look a little bit better, maybe. Okay, so now the background, you know, we need to extend it. Okay, so first of all we need to align it to the camera. So RZ, and, you know, align it to the camera. So it's more or less perpendicular with the camera direction. And then, you know, GXX and extend it here, and then EZ, and then GXX, and do something like this. And let's see how we're looking. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. So SY, SYY, and scale it on Y-axis until, you know, it sticks outside of the camera frame. And we don't really need this to be so tall. So let's you know, let's just bevel this. But before we bevel this, actually, I'm gonna make it a little bit flatter. So GXX, make it a bit more flat. Let's try this again. So Control 0, there we go. And that looks good. Let's grab this edge and let's, you know, let's bevel this like this. Okay, that's good. And sharpen. Now let's go to 3D viewport, and we're going to add some edges here, some loops. More or less they're gonna, you know, they should be fitting the size of these. So more or less, okay. And then we're gonna draw loops like this. Okay, so we're gonna create quads, right? We're gonna select all of them and right click and subdivide and Shift R to repeat that. And maybe one more time. Just create tiny squares. Okay, then go to select and checker deselect, and then zoom in really closely and just press I to inset. And this, you know, if it's lagging for you, you can just go to local view, hold shift, and create kind of like a narrow, you know, narrow sort of rectangles. And we're going to press E and extrude it downwards, okay? It doesn't matter how low it goes, just it's not a problem. What we want is kind of like a perforated floor for this gun, okay? Gonna look like a, you know, metal with some kind of a perforation, which is gonna be cool. Alright, let's go back to the cycles. Let's grab this plane here in the bottom, Alt M, and just set a blank matte. And we're gonna have to fix it a bit. So let's go to mattes, and we're gonna make it a bit brighter, probably. And we're gonna make it metallic for sure, way more rough than this. We're gonna add clear coat and clear coat roughness. Cool. Looking good. And now, you know, we need to decide darker or brighter. I think brighter in this case is better, okay? So, you know, something brighter like this, right? So now settings, compositing. Use nodes. We're gonna be using composite for denoising. So go here and turn off the noise because we don't need that. Shift A and then the noise and drop it in here. And then we're gonna go here and turn on the noising data, which will enable these two nodes, you see. We're gonna connect them here. Just drag your mouse to connect them, and that's it, okay? In the future, just as a tip, if you wanna create bloom in cycles, just add glare. Switch it to fog glow and high, and pop it in here like this. If you need bloom. We don't need bloom at the moment. If you enable bloom in this situation, okay, what's gonna happen is that this highlight on this chamfer is gonna be very reflective, almost like a light, because Blender will amplify any reflection in the scene, okay? So that's gonna be a problem. So let's not do that. Awesome. And then let's go to path, so light path. And, you know, I think I'm just gonna go with just quite high settings here, 8.8, and maybe 12.12, because we got some gloss here, so this would do. Maybe glossy could be 12 as well. This is really high. Normally I would go like 8.6.6.6.6.6, okay? But, you know. Now the number of samples is way too high. We're gonna change it to 250. We don't need that many, because we're gonna be using the noiser. Of course, GPU compute, because, you know, that's essential. And then under performance, you can change the number of tiles. I'm gonna be using 2048, so, and we don't need that. So we don't have any hair. So cool. And this should do. Now, if you notice here, we're using 8.3 gigs out of 24, right? But if you switch to render to 3D viewport, this will drop dramatically. If your RAM doesn't clear after this, what you can do is simply, you know, power save this, close Blender and reload the file, and this should clean up a little bit of VRAM. I think Blender doesn't really do a great job on cleaning, you know, clearing the memory. So, and that's that, guys. So this is set. We can collapse it. We don't really need to play with this anymore, and we're good to render, I think. So we can go ahead and test it, but before we do that, there's one more thing I want to do, and that's depth of field, okay? So I'm gonna actually set the depth of field here, so the back of this plane, these tiny holes, the perforation, is not sharp, okay, because I don't need it to be sharp. So let's go to depth of field. Now, normally you can click on any of these items and camera will focus. The problem is that camera always focuses on your origin point. So, you know, if you click on something, like for example this element, camera will focus in here. And that could actually be not a bad idea. Somewhere here probably gonna be better. Let me see. We could focus manually on this element. The reason why I'm saying it's important, because when you're working with camera, there is something called plane of focus, and plane of focus is a field of focus that is in front of the camera, is parallel to the lens, okay? So in our case, our plane of focus, okay, would be like this. Let me just show you, right? Let me just rotate it. It's gonna be parallel to the lens, okay? So our plane of focus would be like this, all right? The higher aperture, the more things you're gonna have in focus. So let's say aperture let's say 1.4, okay, so f-stop 1.4, it's gonna be really tiny, meaning your focus is gonna be tiny. And since the gun is diagonal, you're gonna slice your gun in half with your plane of focus. So you're gonna have a tiny bit in focus until it's gonna be blurry. So in this situation, because we're not parallel to the gun, gun is sort of like at 40 degrees angle. We need to have a little bit more in focus than usual. So I would say we should go with at least probably 4, f4 in this situation, okay? And we should focus somewhere, maybe somewhere here, okay, in this area. So what I'll probably do is I'm gonna do it manually, okay? So I'm gonna switch to Eevee because the feedback is quicker, okay? And I'm going to zoom in, right here, you see it's blurry. And I'm gonna, with camera selected, because you need to have camera selected, I'm going to focus on this element, okay? So we're gonna go to depth of field and change the distance until we focus on this element here, okay? So let's make sure it's sharp, all right? That's sharp enough, all right, cool. So it's about 16 meters. And this should ensure that more or less everything is in focus, okay? There might be slight fall off on the stock, but the main focus is gonna be here, so that's important. So when I zoom in now, you can see that, this is all in focus, right? And the background, you see, it's blurred, okay? And my stock here is kind of fuzzish, We could go with 5.6. Let me see that. 5.6. Yeah, it's gonna be more in focus here, and the background still out of focus. Perfect. This will ensure that, more or less this whole area here is gonna be in focus, and this is gonna be a fall off. Another thing we can do is we can actually remove this entire top. So let's go to occlude because we don't need that, okay? Because when your background is so large, it will obscure light. We don't need this bit, right? So we can remove it so our light is, not so affected. Same here, we can remove this. Just go to viewport, it's gonna be faster. Press B and we can just, delete all that. We don't need it. And you can even delete this. Right? Okay. Because all of these things, okay, on the sides, they will obscure light. Alright, so now you can see that we have a bit more light. It looks a bit cleaner. This reflection in the back really, annoys me, so I might actually increase the clear core roughness here to remove that bit from the back. That's a bit better. Okay, cool. Alright, we can try this. So let's try to render that. So let's go to render, and now again, when you're going to be rendering, I recommend you switch from render to 3D viewport, so you're going to be using less RAM, less VRAM. So, if you have a weaker card, then it should help. So we're going to be creating 2 renders. One of them is going to be gun with the environment, and the other one's going to be just the gun, so we can use a cutout of the gun to manipulate with it in Photoshop, okay? Actually, this is pretty decent. It's not too bad. The reflection is quite natural, so I like that. So let's wait for the composite to kick in. There we go. Now let's save it, and it's going to be... Now, when you save this, I want you to save in 16-bit, okay, and TIFF. You're gonna have more data to work with. 8-bit is really not enough. It's just not enough tonal transitions in the file. Just not enough data for you to work in Photoshop properly. So I prefer always to bring a bigger file into Photoshop to have more data to work with, especially at the beginning when I'm adjusting, major stuff like exposure, etc. Okay, so let's call it gun course 1 and save it. And then I'm going to create one more. I'm going to click on the background, and I'm going to disable it in render, and I'm going to render just the gun, okay? This should be much quicker. There you go, 11 seconds. That was really quick. So here, let's call it gun 2 and switch to 16-bit. And although this one doesn't really matter because we're going to be using it only as a cutout, But occasionally you will find yourself that, you know, the cutout has interesting highlights or shadows, and you want to mask them in onto your main file. So you do want to have this maximum amount of data that comes with 16-bit TIFF. Alright, cool. So we're good, guys. So we can just, you know, power save this. And the next video we're going to be working in Photoshop. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.